Attorney General Bill Barr confirming evidence that Antifa is behind some of the recent violence.
At some demonstrations, there are extremist agitators who are hijacking the protests to pursue their own separate and violent agenda. We have evidence that Antifa and other similar extremist groups, as well as actors of a variety of different political persuasions, have been involved in instigating and participating in the violent activity.
This, as a new report claims, Antifa has been planning an anti-government insurgency for months. Here to discuss, Fox Nation host Laura Logan, who has reported on Antifa. You know, Laura, one of the other things that Bill Barr mentioned was they have evidence that certain foreign actors have hijacked the protests as well for their own agenda. Any idea who those certain foreign actors might be?
Well, I've been talking to various intelligence sources and also counterterrorism sources and others spread throughout the law enforcement community. And the obvious suspects that they point to are China and, of course, Iran as well, and some of them Russia, too. And I also spoke to a world leader on a long way from here, I won't say who, and even from across the world, they're hearing that America is really tearing itself apart from within, and they see this as a moment of strategic opportunity. But, you know, there's a difference between hijacking something and exploiting it and fueling it. And that's really the concern here. Who is fueling this outrage? Because they use race and race hatred and racism and all of that as a front. Because when you look at their agenda, which is very well mapped out online, what they're actually doing is fueling racism and fueling race hatred by reinforcing stereotypes and dividing people.
Laura, let me ask you about, specifically with regards to Antifa, you're reporting on that. I've covered them. I've been speaking to them in the last few days because I covered them during the inauguration. And their viewpoint, at least here in Washington, is that what they've done so far in terms of tactics has not worked. So they are participating in these protests and escalating their tactics. What can you tell us about what we may see in the coming days at these protests?
So, you know, that seems somewhat misguided to me because it's not that their tactics are not working. Go back to the literature of these organizations that you can find online. They've been planning this not just for a few months, but for decades. And this is sort of the culmination. It's almost like the Super Bowl of their efforts. They're giving up so much of their operational secrecy by exposing themselves to the degree to which they're exposed. You know, you can see them in their black. You can see them with the backpacks on. If you take freeze frames of them, you can see the earpieces they have in their ears. And you know law enforcement is doing this kind of thing, right? So if you think about how they're exposing themselves, that's an extraordinary capacity to give up that level of secrecy. And yet they're doing it because they're being incredibly successful. What are their objectives? Divide the military and the police. Make the public choose a side. Well, that's happening quite significantly in some ways, right? Now we're talking about defund the police. That's one of their big objectives, is to abolish the police. And if you look at their agenda as it's laid out, step by step, they're closer than they've ever been to reaching their goal. And some of the things that you can expect to see is they're trying to push the president and this administration to go beyond their constitutional authority. The ultimate goal, one of the goals in using racism and using hatred to fuel this is to erase the Constitution. So if you look at the 1619 project that was carried out by the New York Times, and things like Blackout Tuesday, which is about, you know, having a commercial blackout on Tuesdays once a week to disrupt the working week. What are all these things designed to do? They're designed to get you one step closer to a Marxist state, which has no borders, which has no police force, which has no law to enforce. And by the way, in which we're all oppressors. We're not defined by race for them. If you're a black person and you own a business, you're an oppressor. If you're a black person and you have a house and you have renters, you're an oppressor. If you're a black policeman, you're an oppressor. Because just look at Minneapolis, where you have the police chief is black. The state attorney general is black, right? I mean, this isn't about a black-white thing for them. They just put that forward. And as long as you're focusing on that, you'll never really pay attention to what's happening over here. You'll never really come up with a solution. And that's what they want. They want everybody to focus on the race issue because they know how divisive that is, and it helps them.
All right, Laura, I was on Fox Nation last night, and you can watch her, Laura Logan.